geluba naqdogliyo nugal waa ku darara melay nabadi joogta.
Welcome to ISIRKA. My name's Amina Isir, and join me as I take you on a journey to explore identity, culture, and belonging. Take a seat as I take you through time, space, and various perspectives of cultural identity. Stay tuned to see where the journey will take us today. Welcome. I'm excited for this episode. I have a special guest with me all the way from England. Habo, please introduce yourself briefly to those who don't know you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Amina. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Probably the oldest person on your podcast.
I've had my dad, so you're not.
Okay. And alhamdulillah, my name is Zainab Dahir in the UK and Zainab al-Shari amongst the Somalis. And alhamdulillah, living in London, right? Engaged in language and teaching. Yeah, those are my interests.
So if you have ever been to Somali Week, I don't know if any of you listening have, but Habo is like a main staple part of the Somali Week programming. We've seen each other in Hargeisa and in London, which is kind of how my Somali diaspora world works. And she always was doing programming for like young children around Somali language learning. And so her Instagram, all her stuff is under Zainab Galool. So where did you get the name Galool from? Why did you attach that to a lot of the work that you're doing?
SubhanAllah, mashallah, thank you. That is a really good question. And I spent so much time in authenticating things, you know, I might discuss them just out of the blue. And when I started off, I knew I wanted to do something within learning, within education. And if you go into the Quran, if you go into even in the Western world, you would see where did a pencil come from? It came from a tree. Where did paper come from? It came from a tree. So you know, the English is they're very proud of their oak tree, you know, and other communities are very, I know the Turkish, I can't remember their tree, but they're very proud of a certain tree that is, lives for thousands of years, and it's quite big and it's got long roots, and they have a lot of stories and myths around it. And I think it's called the sycamore. And then there's the Canadians in there. Is it a maple tree?
Yes, yeah.
So the trees is very, very, communities love, and education based. So I thought, what tree would Somalis, you know, revere? What tree is it, the tree that stands amongst, you know, the highest of the trees, the greatest of the trees? So I had all these names, you know, Tamal and Galool and Megag and all these, but I'm writing them down and I'm researching and I'm just targeting people who like poetry and who are elderly. Yeah. So this old lady Edo of mine, and I Galool how is it so special? Galool and its bark is you know, they get coloring from its bark. The brides, and you know, and it becomes an heirloom, and it's handed down to daughters and daughters and daughters. All this list of beneficials, and its wood is long lasting, and you know, is protected. It's protected. You know, its branches or its trunks. So we're geared very, very special to Somaliland. And I thought, excellent. This is what's going to be my logo and name, Galool.
I love it. Making sure you have a lasting, long legacy. Inshallah. But okay, take us a little bit back. So one of the first things I learned about you that I still kind of stick to this day is that although you could very easily be, around my mother's age, you were born in England, and then you're doing all of this work around the Somali language. So, you know, all of us that were born in the diaspora, they're always like, oh, you need to Afghana Baratan, you guys have lost it. But you're one prime example of somebody who's kept their language and their culture, like despite being born abroad. So what did that look like, or how did that kind of come about?
Well, I won't say it was easy. It was not easy. Yeah. But it's doable, and I'm living proof that it's doable. And all the stuff that you guys have experienced, I've experienced. We're a little bit more, because at least there's numbers in your generations. Yeah. Our generation, we were very few, very, very few, and far apart as well. So in Bristol in particular, I think we were the only Somali family there. Yeah. And then, you know, at first, then on our street, there was another family that came by, but there was not many people, definitely not around my age, you know, who were in Bristol. But Cardiff was a different story. Cardiff, you've heard of Cardiff, yeah? Mm-hmm. Capital of Wales, yeah. So that was a different cup of tea. And London also a different cup of tea. And Liverpool a different cup of tea. So basically we were scattered across the country. Yeah, where we don't see many Somalis. In ISIRKA, obviously, that's not true. Every street that you go, there's a Somali person, or if you know, the Somalis living there, but there's quite a lot of us. So this was an anomaly, first of all. So we grew up being in a school, nursery school, primary school, whatever, you know, and it's just you and your sibling, or this, right? So we didn't have much Somali knowledge. And then I first went to Somalia, Hargeisa in particular, when I was around 10, and obviously no language, and immediately the labels, you know, I mean, this is not unique to me, but the labels is something that we all share. We you know, for us, it was like Galo, you can't speak, so you're a Galo. And my mother is very religious, and hearing that word, it was not nice, you know, it would send me to tears. And then you don't know your qabil. Allah, that was another thing. So all the hiccups that you will face, we've faced. Yeah. And then there's the accent. I was the eldest, so I was the one with the heaviest accent. Even though I was 10, still I was the one with the heaviest accent. And, you know, there's different types of you know, the children, they have different magaranasa and adkesi. I could not stand people laughing at whatever I was trying to say. So, and then I went inside myself. I became a shell. I would not speak. 2 years, probably, I've only spoken to my mum and my siblings. Yes. If I went to school, if wherever else I went, I wouldn't speak. So, you know, there's children who are like that, you know, who are shy and, you know, and get intimidated by, you know, the horror of others laughing at them, and etc. etc. My brother was a different cup of tea, so he didn't mind whoever laughed. So immediately he but I did not. And then I could not stay because of health reasons. Otherwise, I wouldn't eat the food. I was very, very sick. You know, it's those of you who've had mosquito bites, every little so I was sent back by myself back to the UK, while my parents and my siblings stayed in Hammer. So, you know, everything that you could experience, I've experienced. And then there's all the baggage that, especially the guys who came after the breakdown of the country in late 80s and then 90s, the majority in the 90s, you know, parents with their small children coming to the UK, you know, children who are 10, who are 8, who are 7, who are 5, and then they are going to experience all the stuff that I experienced in school, yeah? And, you know, the racism, I'm sure no one can deny the racism that exists, you know, no one can deny. Any black person, any brown person, any mixed race person, any other person who is living in that country, especially if it's a Caucasian country, you will experience racism. You will experience it in school, you will experience it in the workplace, you'll experience it on the streets, everywhere, you know. And then there's the Islamophobia. These are things that already that we have, you know, faced and experienced. And if people are smart, they would learn from what went on beforehand. Somehow, you know. So the new parents that arrived with their small children, they should have learned from already the established community, but they didn't. They were so mesmerized and, you know, romanticized about, you know, the new language and the European cultures and blah, blah, blah. right? And the day-to-day, catch up of life, paying for your gas bills and getting your and passports and whatever, etc. So they were more engaged in that they didn't look at their kids. They thought sending the kids to school is enough, which is probably what used to happen in back home. You send your child to school and that's it, but hands off. But here it's a different setup. And then the education changes. There's always new methods and new techniques and new stuff that's going. It doesn't stay. How people were taught in the 60s is definitely different from the 70s, and it's again different in the 80s, and again different. And the Somali community, they're not aware of all of this. The blackboard that they left, in fact, still exists back home. In some areas, the blackboard still exists. I know there's a lot of there's innovation and technology and all of that. Like the blackboard still exists, but how can you won't see a blackboard? No. Yeah. So their idea of sending your child to school backfired big time. So what then catapulted was across the globe, the same phenomena was happening. Somali children would start off as being as one of the brightest children. So they're very bright at nursery and reception in year one, and you call it malaha in what do you call them,
kindergarten,
preschool, those first years, at 5, at 3, at 4, those years, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, they're on par with their peers. But as the years go by, they start losing that, right? So even sometimes they're ahead, because bilingual children, brain-wise, children who know more than one language, they are already set up for, speedy learning. Yeah. So instead of capitalizing on that, it was actually the other way around. They were losing that advantage that they started with. So 2005, then this came to a head, and in Cardiff City Council, there was a big turnout of any practitioner who comes across a Somali child, from nurses to doctors to education to teachers to professors to curriculum setters to ministers, you name it. And they came from all over the world. They came from Canada and America and Holland and you name it, wherever Somalis were, they came. And then, there was lots of things discussed, but, one of the things that was asked was, in the audience, is there anybody with a Somali degree, Somali language degree, a master degree, or a bachelor degree? And there was only one person who put his hand up, subhanAllah. So anyway, from listening to all this expertise that was going on, and from my own little experience, what I thought, because look, when I went to Somalia as a 10-year-old, I won't say I was a broken child, but I was a child who had baggage, this racist card. And Bristol is not, it was the center of the slave trade, in the UK. Bristol and Liverpool, very, very prominent places for this. And you could see the street names and the hills, and you could see the traces of it, So, and I was a child who read a lot. So I knew of this, I had this baggage basically. But when I went to Somaliland, and I came out of the airport, and in my eyes, it was it was beautiful, because we got on British Airways to Aden, this is Aden in Yemen, and it was horrid, the climate was like, it was just sun. The ground and the walls and the buildings and everything was just the same color. There was no trees in my eyes then, right? It was super hot. We stayed there for 2 weeks. God, we stayed with like just our underwears and a little slip. It was super hot. And then the water that you drink was like salty. It was like the berbera water, right? And everything about it was just horrible. 2 weeks we were there, and oh my God, the goats. The first time I saw goats in the street, it was there. And I'm thinking, oh my God, the zoo. I said, mommy, the zoo's outside, the zoo's outside. I only saw goats in the zoo, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, to cut a long story short, from that airport to Hargeisa airport, you know, Hargeisa and 7 a.m. that it's cold, isn't it? It's very, very cold. And the sky is bluer than blue. And the sand is golden, isn't it? Golden. Anyway, it was a different scenario. You know, it's like trees that were green, the sun that was super yellow, and the sky that was super blue. It was just beautiful compared to the island and of course, England in those days now was just that gray, rainy. You know, it wasn't like this that it is now. You know, my childhood memories of England is just always grey. So this beautiful land Banunimi, and then out of this beautiful airport, there was a whole bus waiting for us. So from my school, where there was only me and my brother, and the whole area that we lived in, there were no Black people, to coming out onto this golden, you know, sand and beautiful, you know, scenery that I'm seeing, and a whole busload, I'm told, this is all your family, this is your uncle, this is your Edud. Wow. And I'm thinking, there was only 2 of us, and now I have, you know, all these brown people, and, you know, and I'll never be picked on again, never, because look, they're all chocolate faced. Yeah, I was, you know, the children would always say chocolate face, and I'd fight, you know, even though chocolate is a nice thing to have, but now everybody's chocolate face. So, you know, being in one with this country was just the first impression that I had. Forget the language, forget that I couldn't speak, I didn't care. If I kept mum, people would people pick on me? No, because I'm like everybody else. They wouldn't know. So this is, you know, this is what having confidence is about, isn't it? You know, where I was born, I was constantly fighting, but here I'm part of you know, a wider community. I'm part of a bigger family. So basically, when fast forwarding to 2005 and this, from that meeting and all the presentations that are happening, what I saw time and time again for myself was that, you know, the kids that have arrived here, who have probably seen, you know, death, who have seen walking, you know, for miles and miles and miles, you know, seeking refuge in Ethiopia, or, you know, Kenya after 91, it was Kenya. And before the first lot that came, it was Ethiopia that they fled to. By any means that they could, the lorries and whatever that they traveled with, if they're not walking, breaking down halfway, being robbed, whatever, everybody has a story to tell. Everybody, even a small child who was 4 years old had a story to tell, you know. So what I thought was, you know, these kids need their confidence boosted, need to be told that they are from a beautiful land, need to be told that they have a beautiful culture, and need to be told that they have a beautiful language, you know. And this is how I started off. This is how I started off with this project, you know. But unfortunately, the parents of that time, as I said, you know, they're bedazzled by this world. That's all I can say, honestly. You know, and now I'm sure they're all biting their fingers, you know, saying, you know, what have I missed? But your generation, I think, will be ready to embrace and pass on the baton, if you like. And whatever resources that I'm trying to make is for that purpose. You know, is for that purpose, for when the Somalis in the diaspora are ready to embrace when they're ready mentally, physically, you know, to embrace their identity, then this is a go-to. You know, these will be the resources that will help them.
You know, like kind of growing up, the different ethnic groups, they would have like, you know, Saturday classes where you go and get the language. And I think maybe we were just too new as like a diaspora group, that we weren't that settled in the West to even be thinking about those type of things. It was like, for me, my mom was like, when we were growing up, you have to speak Somali to me in the house so that you know Somali. But then after a while, there's no outside usage of Somali, right? So then it's not a functional aspect of everyday life. But I think now people, it's so crazy. Like I was saying yesterday on Instagram, like the young kids all listen to Somali music on TikTok. Like I'm like every single day, like Sultan Serar, Il Kase, whatever is kind of hot.
Yeah.
Gen Z's listening to it. So I think and that's one way of finding accessibility to their culture, right? Then there's like they put on a direct and they're like, oh, for the culture. But then it's kind of that other aspect of learning past like the first space of interaction with whatever you have access to online. That's kind of a lot of what you're talking about. Like, so what do those resources look like and what type of things are you building?
Okay, quickly. I started off for language learning, because I'm a teacher and my language acquisition is mostly self-taught. And we had this conversation before. I tell you, I just fell in love I fell in love with the Qarami songs of Muhammad Sulaiman and and Muhammad Ahmed and those guys, Shimbir. Oh my God, I fell in love with those, and it was very difficult for me to hear them at first. I would then sit under, my mum and say, Hulaim, and then I would write it on. So I had this folder of songs, categorized by, yeah. But vocabulary, unbeknown to me, I was building vocabulary. Absolutely. I was building vocabulary passively, So I started off with these flashcards for small kids. So it's not bilingual because, you talked about the after school, not after school club, but did you say after school club or?
The Saturday language club.
I know we're not after school but the Saturday. So Somali, mashallah, tabarakallah, horta Quran, they've held on to it with an iron fist, alhamdulillah. So what I did was I set up this group called Iftin Network, and it was the Quran, so Saturday and Sunday and Tuesday and Thursday, 4 days ban wahaysinay, but I included the Somali into it as well. And our Somali was fun. It wasn't like the blackboard type. It wasn't the blackboard type. It was all about fun, so I started off with Dada. Have I got Dada here? So this is Dada, right? Learn Somali. This is book 2, and it teaches you why Abo Waysehate is wrong. Abo Waysehate kugu qasbay, ama Abo korbi chogta ma halafable. Because a language game where those of us who do French and Spanish and Arabic, there are certain languages which are gender-based, and Somali are one of those. So once you know your nouns and the genders, you're able to then fix everything that comes after it, the verb, your done. So I started off with the dada. Do you reckon I got that? Well, my son named it.
Oh, nice.
لكن كالي دادا دي بدها صبر. There's a song.
Oh yeah. I thought it was like dada sit ayar okala, learn it easily.
ويان دي ayar ويان دادا ترتيب ويان سمعها. When a child is learning how to walk, ayar dada later, and it's learning. So it was nice for me. Dada, And these are the flashcards that are meant to make learning fun, So we'd have, in our household when I started off, we'd have like competitions, like mom and dad and, the kids like grouping up, and then we'd have, competitions with words, how many B words do you know? And, how many words can you get out of babur? There's bur, and there's no bab Arabi, like there's or and there's or. How many words can you get out from just babur? I can do 5, I can do 10. You do your 10, I'll challenge you. And so we got these games out of it, and then we had the charades. Being all sorts of games back cards. And then when you're learning a language, you have to have text to practice. Reading, you're learning, And then you go and buy books, and they're either not very nice to look at, or they've got so much errors that it defeats the purpose of teaching grammar. So then I started off writing the stories. I started off with Al-Wahid Bagale, which is a Somali, they always have their little verses in everything. So there's verses in all the stories. This one ends up with, the Dabagale, which is the squirrel, outwits the lion. So he sings the song, Ninyar or Nimwing Dilema Arakten. Have you seen a small man, outwit a big man? And then Dabagale Ardile. Have you seen a squirrel that got rid of a lion? Yeah. So this story one could be Labe. And you know what? I've got authentic scenes even, like, I know it's like a cartoony, but that is a camera taken image from in Oberkhadle. So there's like the dry rivers that we have just outside Hargeisa. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that looks like certainly like something that I can visually see that out, like like camels just chilling in that empty area.
No, the camels were put on top, like in the valley bar authentica.
Oh, okay.
The valley bar authentica.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Can you see the valley?
Yeah, no, I see it.
Barkhadle.
And then also like the shrubbery on the side.
Yeah. And then there's I had another project of a library project, a lot of storytelling, not just Somali, but even other stories. And it was English based, and so I had lots of little other children, Asians and other children from other nationalities, and then they had to vote which was their best story out of the project, and this was voted the best.
Oh, nice!
I made a book out of it. So this is Dini Dawa. Obviously, Dini Dawa, the hare and the tortoise. Somehow, it's in lots of languages, but ours, simply because it's got it morphs from one scene to another scene to another scene, and then it's got the famous verses as well. Somehow, yeah. Do you know the cabit? Maybe David said the cabit. The that's the verse. And then I did Medel 3 stories. So it's about 3 stories based on hyena. Yeah. Not I didn't go for the lion, I went for the hyena, right? Because it's so gonna some traits on the chalet.
Yeah.
So I went with that. And then 2019, I had Shimbir Garabla or completely Somalia. And last year I had my first bilingual. Wallahi Dadka. And this is what I was trying to pick your brain with. I don't understand why you guys want bilingual, but
because bilingual is easy so that you can look and compare, because I think there's something about if you're fully learning a language, you'll fully learn it in that language, but we're still trying to exist between the two worlds and not fully gain mastery. So like even
like investment, look, at the beginning it's going to need kind of an intensive investment. It's going to be hard. Like once you're over that first period, then it's much easier when you have the single source. Yeah. Because if you have the bilingual, you're constant. It hinders. I know it hinders. If you look at the Quran, the kids who use Quran and use the transliteration, their accent is terrible, and they never get the diction, the right diction. Like once they invest in the alphabet, sometimes they invest like the 2 whole years just doing alif bata. Then their diction is fixed, and then it becomes easy. And then Somali children and Quran were number 1 across the globe. And I came with that mentality because you're always going to look at English. And I get what you say, but I think maybe dictionaries should work here. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's fair. And I think a part of it is also like, we ain't really young anymore. So it's just kind of like, it took me a while to realize, okay, if you learn Spanish, you're going to learn Spanish. So you also could just learn Somali, like if you don't fully understand. But it was like a mental hurt. I was like, why should I learn that? Like, I'm Somali, isn't that enough? But it's about language and learning it to learn it, not just about existing. So it's a lot of work though to put in, but
at the beginning investment kairka, it needs that investment at the beginning. Like afterwards, it should be easier.
Yeah.
But that's the journey so far.
But then also, so outside of all the books that you've put together, you're also involved in a whole bunch of language learning groups and spaces where, so could you speak a little bit about that? What that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes, obviously, you know, my love for this language, you can tell. Yeah. In 2009, UNESCO has highlighted. Actually, it came out with a statement. First of all, UNESCO tells us that every 2 years a language dies. Every 2 years a language is not spoken in this world anymore. Yeah, and then after that, 2009, what came up was that the Somali language is showing signs of a dying language. My good, when I heard that, immediately that's when Galool was born. Wallahi, yeah, and I thought. I did say not on my watch, but obviously they're Zainab on her little own. What I can do is, you know, immortalize. You know, once it's written, at least it's there. I'm gonna say that's what I meant, not on my watch. Like me on my own cannot. Alhamdulillah, lakin ilahay arki malah niyadida. You know, what happened was in there was 2012. I was invited onto the Somali speaking pen, which is part of the international pen, and I was invited to Djibouti. Allahu Akbar. And I thought, my God, how am I going to I was overwhelmed with Wahan. But once I was there, I mashallah, I could immediately see, you know, what I could contribute. Wow, let's put it that way. Yeah. And then alhamdulillah, after that year, 2013, then out of that meeting, what got born was the research academy, a research academy called Academia Goboleedka of Somalia, right? And in English, it was translated as the Intergovernmental Academy for Somali Language. So basically, all the regions, Shanti Somali, Aya Kubahobe, have come together to take care of this language, its progression, its poetry, its literature, its development, its orthography, its lexicography. So then that got born, and alhamdulillah, to this day, I'm part of that group. Initially, I was put on the grammar group, you know, as you can tell, you know. I was very interested in, you know, why is Aba Wese Hate wrong? So from there, I learnt the mechanics of the language in a little bit. I can't say I've mastered it, but I know quite a bit. And then there's the translation also that took me into a different branch. There's research, research based anyway. The academy is a research. It's a professional group of people. So we brought out a couple of books, Mid Afmalay Rahdo, or Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3, Makale, and a dictionary, the latest dictionary, Somali Sabahay, Markasu Sabahay, you know. I think every household should have
oh wow,
a volume like this.
So the people who are part of these groups, where do they live?
Allah, all over the world there. Yeah. All over the world. Yeah, there's first of all, the headquarters is now in Hamar. It started off being in Djibouti, so the first 2 years it was in Djibouti, and then 2015 it was moved to Mogadishu. There's groups in Hargeisa, there's Chichiga, and in Nairobi and Djibouti. So in Africa, Al-Kasi, and then there's branches in the UK, in America, Canada, America was called Middle Malenia,
pretty much.
And the Scandinavians, Australia, so we're all over.
Yes, you're pretty much. Although we're all dispersed across the world, there still is a nucleus that's coming together.
Djibouti, yes, my latest trip to Djibouti. Well, it was fun. It was for the academy, and we had because this year, 2022, Somali language, Somali orthography is now 50 years old. If you think of 1972 to 2022, we're 50 years old. So we're going to have this big haflado, both in the interior, both in Africa and outside as well. All happening at the same time, the same week, inshallah. There's going to be big noise. So we went emergency meeting to plan all this stuff, and there were 4 days of intense meetings and stuff, and then the last day, the president heard that we were. He mashallah, he's a staunch supporter, and he heard that we were dispersing, that day, and he said, "No, nobody can leave until they meet me." So all our tickets got postponed. Those who were leaving that morning, everybody. We went to the palace, and mashallah, what a beautiful palace, and COVID still very, very much, people scared of COVID, so testing every step of the way, and all the protocols, and mashallah. And then we got to meet the president, alhamdulillah, and there's protocols to follow. The elders speak, and as the meeting was coming to an end, he said, "Oh no, we have to hear the ladies as well. The ladies' voices has to be heard." So there was this lady, her name Asha, and mashallah, she spoke on behalf of us. And obviously the Somali, he's a really staunch supporter. He's from day one, and she said this, and then she said, and how could I have that support kaga lagu maqadin, oh, maanta waxay nala joogtaa in gabadh dibadda ku dhalatay oo maanta researchkana ka mid ah. She started talking about me, and and he took a double take, dibadda ku dhalatay. And then maxaan ku dhahdaa, so she, mashallah, so I had a set of my books as well for him.
Yeah, nice.
Passed on. And then when we were going into the group photo, the official presidential photo, then he came up to me, and again he said, "We got it, Kunate." And I thought, so basically I'm telling this little anecdote to say that, yes, myself back in the day, 2012, I was intimidated by, these big names, you have Somali, but we can all of us fill in a gap. There's a gap for us to fill, Well, alhamdulillah, all I can say is Afghani wa Afghadima. This is a very, very old language, It has its roots and its footprints to the pharaohs, mashallah, and it has plenty to give, Each language it has plenty to give, anyway, that's another story for another day. But this language will die if it doesn't transfer to the next generation. If the parents do not hand it down to their children, and that child does not hand it down to their children, then it will die, one day. Yeah. So first of all, Afghani, it's a beautiful language that has a lot to give to the world. Yeah. It's poetry alone, a lot to learn from her. And how could I that? And it's a duty upon the national, yes, identity in British, I do have Yes, identity, American car, we do have, but we also have the Somali identity that you cannot run away from, because this face is giving you away.
And the forehead, especially.
kala naqrono meel wana faba